Logan, my boy, Richard boomed across the mahogany table, his voice dripping with faux affection. Tell us, how's that job of yours going? The air thickened with a familiar tension. I could feel the eyes of my extended family on me, a mixture of pity and amusement. Richard, my stepfather, had a knack for turning even the most innocuous questions into thinly veiled insults. It's going well, Richard, I replied, keeping my voice even, though my jaw clenched involuntarily. We're working on a new project, a pretty exciting... Project? Richard interrupted, a wave of his hand dismissing my words. What kind of project could a lowly data analyst possibly be working on? Spreadsheet optimization? Stapler efficiency reports? A ripple of laughter spread across the table. Tyler, my stepbrother, smirked, his eyes gleaming with malicious glee. Don't forget coffee runs, Logan, he chimed in. You're probably the best coffee fetcher in the entire company. More laughter. I felt my cheeks burning, the familiar sting of humiliation creeping up my neck. This was a typical scene at any family gathering. Richard, the self-made millionaire, the epitome of ruthless ambition, loved to flaunt his wealth and belittle anyone who didn't measure up to his standards. And I, the lowly data analyst, the stepson from his wife's previous marriage, was his favorite target. You see, Logan, Richard continued, his voice condescending, real men build empires. They take risks, they make decisions, they lead. They don't shuffle papers and fetch coffee for their superiors. I'm not fetching coffee, I muttered, though my voice was barely audible above the snickers. Oh, but you are, Logan, Tyler insisted, leaning forward, his voice dripping with mock concern. You're just a cog in the machine, a replaceable part, a nobody. The word hung in the air, a sharp barb aimed at my heart. Nobody. That's how they saw me. Richard, Tyler, the entire extended family. A nobody, a failure, a disappointment. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. Years of suppressed anger, of resentment, of humiliation boiled within me. I had spent my entire life working hard, proving myself, trying to earn their respect, but it was never enough. Richard always found a way to tear me down, to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. But tonight, something shifted within me. A spark ignited, a resolve hardened. I was done being their punching bag, their source of amusement, their nobody. You know, Tyler, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You might be surprised to learn that data analysts actually do quite a bit more than just fetch coffee. We analyze trends. We identify patterns. We provide the insights that allow companies like your father's to succeed. The laughter died down. Richard's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Tyler, however, just scoffed. Oh, please, Logan, he said, rolling his eyes. Don't try to make yourself sound important. You're just a glorified office clerk, a data entry monkey. The entire table erupted in laughter again. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the sting of humiliation. Instead, I felt a cold, hard resolve. You're wrong, Tyler, I said, my voice calm, even, and you'll see just how wrong you are. Soon. And in that moment, as I looked at their faces, contorted with amusement and disdain, a plan began to form in my mind. A plan that would not only prove them wrong, but would take everything from them. Everything. Okay, so maybe data entry monkey wasn't exactly the most accurate description of my skills. Sure, I analyzed data, but I also had a knack for spotting trends, for predicting market shifts, for making money. And I had been doing it quietly, under the radar, for years. Richard, with his old-school mentality, scoffed at anything that wasn't tangible, anything that couldn't be measured in bricks and mortar. Bitcoin? He'd scoff, swirling his brandy. That internet money? It's a fad, Logan, a bubble waiting to burst. He, of course, had poured his millions into real estate, luxury cars, and, anything that screamed, I'm rich and you're not. I, on the other hand, had been quietly diverting a portion of my measly salary into the future. It started with Bitcoin. Back when it was just a whisper on internet forums, a geeky curiosity, I saw the potential. I researched the technology, the blockchain, the decentralized nature of it all. It was revolutionary, disruptive, and undervalued. I started small, buying a few coins here and there whenever I had some spare cash. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And as the price slowly climbed, my investment grew exponentially. "Dude, are you sure about this?" Danny asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "This Bitcoin thing, it seems risky." "Trust me, Danny," I said, a confident smirk spreading across my face. "This is the future, and we're getting in on the ground floor." Danny, bless his cautious heart, wasn't entirely convinced, but he trusted me. He had seen my knack for numbers, my ability to analyze trends, my quiet determination to prove Richard wrong. I wasn't just investing in Bitcoin, I was diversifying. Stocks, bonds, even the occasional risky startup. I read financial reports, analyzed market trends, and, I basically became a one-man hedge fund, all while maintaining my lowly data analyst facade. Richard, oblivious to my secret life as a financial mastermind, continued to underestimate me. "Logan, my boy," he'd say, patting me condescendingly on the shoulder, "you should focus on climbing the corporate ladder. Maybe one day you'll even be able to afford a decent car." I'd just smile politely, hiding the amusement in my eyes. He had no idea that I could probably buy and sell his entire car collection without blinking an eye. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the power. The power to control my own destiny, to build my own future, to finally escape the shadow of Richard's wealth and influence. I worked tirelessly, fueled by a quiet determination that burned deep within me. Late nights poring over financial statements, weekends spent researching investment opportunities, all while maintaining my normal life, my lowly job, my cover. And as my portfolio grew, so did my confidence. The humiliation, the belittling, the constant reminders of my inferiority. They began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of power. The power of knowledge, the power of strategy, the power of knowing that I was playing a game they didn't even realize existed. And as I sat there, late one night, watching the numbers on my screen climb higher and higher, I couldn't help but smile. The plan was in motion. The game had begun. And Richard, Tyler, and the rest of the family, they were about to learn a very valuable lesson. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Taking down Richard wasn't just about having more money than him. It was about strategy, about playing the long game, about dismantling his empire from within. And that meant getting my hands on his company, piece by piece. Thankfully, Richard, blinded by his own arrogance, had made it surprisingly easy. Lancaster Industries was publicly traded, its shares ripe for the picking. But I couldn't just waltz in and start buying them up. That would raise eyebrows, trigger alarms, and, ruin the surprise. So I got creative. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, holding companies with names like Alpha Centauri Investments and Quantum Leap Holdings. Okay, maybe I had a little fun with the names, sue me. Danny, bless his legal heart, nearly had a heart attack when I explained my plan. "Logan, this is complicated and potentially illegal." "Relax, Danny," I said, flashing him a reassuring grin. "It's all perfectly legal, just complex. And besides, you're the lawyer. Your job is to make sure we stay on the right side of the gray areas." He sighed, but I could see the spark of excitement in his eyes. Danny loved a good challenge, a legal puzzle to solve. And this was a masterpiece of financial maneuvering. We spent weeks setting up the network of shell companies, layering them like a financial lasagna, each one obscuring the one Dannyeth. It was a labyrinth of transactions, a web of ownership that would make even the most seasoned forensic accountant dizzy. "This is impressive, Logan," Danny admitted one evening, staring at the intricate diagram I had drawn on his whiteboard. "You've basically created a financial black hole. No one will ever be able to trace these shares back to you." Exactly, I said, a smug grin spreading across my face. It's like a magic trick. Now you see it, now you don't. The buying process was slow, deliberate, and excruciatingly boring. Small packets of shares here, a larger chunk there, all carefully timed to avoid any sudden spikes in trading activity. It was a game of patience, a waiting game. A, a game I was determined to win. Richard, meanwhile, remained oblivious. He was too busy flaunting his wealth, belittling his employees, and generally being the obnoxious, self-absorbed millionaire he had always been. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was slowly eroding, that his empire was being chipped away, piece by piece, by his lowly data analyst stepson. Heard Lancaster Industries is planning a major expansion. I'd casually mentioned to a colleague, feigning disinterest. Seems like Richard's got big plans. Or, I saw Tyler at the casino the other night, I'd confide in a family friend. Seems like he's been celebrating a lot lately. Little snippets of information, seemingly innocuous, but designed to reinforce Richard's sense of security, to lull him into a false sense of invincibility. And as the weeks turned into months, my stake in Lancaster Industries grew. Slowly, steadily, like a vine creeping up a wall, unnoticed until it's too late, I was becoming a silent partner. A shadow lurking in the background, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as I sat there, late one night, staring at the complex web of transactions on my computer screen, a smile spread across my face. The game was afoot, and Richard, my dear stepfather, was about to learn a very valuable lesson. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Okay, so owning a company is more than just having the most shares. It's about influence. And that meant getting to know the players, the people behind the scenes, the ones who really held the power, the board of directors. Richard, bless his arrogant heart, treated the board meetings like a formality, a chance to show off his latest business acumen and bask in their admiration. He saw them as rubber stamps, easily manipulated, easily dismissed, which, of course, was a huge mistake. I, on the other hand, saw them as potential allies, or at the very least, sources of information. I started subtly cultivating relationships, casual lunches, accidental run-ins at charity events, even the occasional round of golf. Turns out I'm a surprisingly good golfer. Who knew? Mr. Thompson, I'd say, extending a hand to one of the more influential board members. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I've heard so much about your strategic insights. Or, Mrs. Johnson, I'd say to another, offering a sincere smile. I'm incredibly impressed with your work on the Q4 projections. Truly visionary. I wasn't just flattering them. I was genuinely interested in their perspectives, their expertise, their gossip. People love to talk about themselves, their accomplishments, their frustrations. And the board members of Lancaster Industries had plenty of frustrations, most of them revolving around one person. Richard. He's difficult, Mr. Thompson confided over lunch one day. Always interrupting, always taking credit for other people's ideas, always being Richard. I can imagine, I'd say, nodding sympathetically. He seems very driven to self-destruction, more like, Mrs. Johnson muttered at a charity gala, swirling her champagne glass. His latest investments, they're incredibly risky. And his personal life. Well, let's just say it's not exactly helping the company's image. Really, I'd say, feigning surprise. I hadn't heard. Of course, I had heard. I had heard everything. Richard's questionable business practices, his reckless spending, his general disregard for anything that wasn't related to his own ego. I wasn't just gathering information. I was planting seeds. Seeds of doubt, seeds of discontent, seeds of rebellion. I subtly suggested that perhaps it was time for a change in leadership, that maybe Lancaster Industries needed a CEO who was less concerned with personal glory and more focused on, actually running the company. Someone with vision, I'd say. Someone with integrity. Someone who understands the future. The board members would nod thoughtfully, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of intrigue and hope. They were tired of Richard's arrogance, his recklessness, his everything. They were looking for a change. And I was quietly positioning myself as the solution. And as I mingled with the board members, gaining their trust, learning their secrets, subtly influencing their opinions, I couldn't help but smile. The game was getting interesting. And Richard, my dear stepfather, had no idea that he was being played. Not just by me, but by the very people he thought he controlled. Tyler, the heir apparent to the Lancaster throne, was a walking, talking embodiment of entitlement. He strutted through life with an unearned confidence, a swagger that screamed, "I deserve everything, and I've done nothing to earn it." Richard, blinded by paternal pride and a desperate need to see himself reflected in his son, enabled Tyler's every whim. Expensive cars, lavish parties, a seemingly bottomless trust fund. Tyler had it all, and he squandered it with the reckless abandon of a trust fund baby who had never heard the word no. "Daddy's little prince," I'd mutter under my breath whenever I saw Tyler flaunting his latest acquisition, a sneer curling my lip. Richard, of course, would just chuckle indulgently, oblivious to the damage he was doing. But Tyler's incompetence wasn't limited to his personal life. He had been handed a cushy executive position at Lancaster Industries, a role he was woefully unqualified for. His decisions were impulsive, his strategies ill-conceived, his leadership non-existent. "Heard Tyler's latest project is a disaster," a colleague whispered to me one day, a mixture of amusement and pity in his eyes. "Seems like he's managed to alienate half the team and blow through the entire budget in record time." "Not surprising," I'd reply with a shrug, though inwardly I was doing a little victory dance. Tyler's failures were music to my ears, each misstep a nail in Richard's coffin. And then there were the public embarrassments. The drunken escapades at exclusive clubs, the tabloid headlines screaming about his latest conquest, well, let's just say that Tyler's definition of discretion was somewhat lacking. "Did you see the photos of Tyler at that charity gala?" a family friend asked me, her voice laced with disapproval. He was inebriated, and his companion, well, let's just say she wasn't exactly dressed for the occasion. "Boys will be boys," I'd reply with a nonchalant shrug, though inwardly I was fist-pumping the air. Tyler's antics were eroding Richard's credibility, tarnishing the Lancaster name, and, well, making my job a whole lot easier. I didn't have to lift a finger. Tyler was digging his own grave, his arrogance and incompetence paving the way for my takeover. Richard, blinded by his own ego and misguided paternal love, couldn't see the damage his son was doing, the cracks he was creating in the foundation of his empire. And as I watched Tyler's self-destruction unfold, a slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. The game was playing itself, and I was just enjoying the show. The day of the takeover dawned crisp and clear, the city skyline shimmering in the morning sun. I stood at my window, overlooking the bustling streets below, a cup of coffee warming my hands, a sense of calm anticipation settling over me. This was it. The culmination of years of planning, of strategizing, of waiting. My phone buzzed. It was Danny. "Ready?" he asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Ready," I confirmed, a confident smirk spreading across my face. The boardroom was a sterile, imposing space, all polished mahogany and leather chairs. The air was thick with tension, the faces of the board members a mixture of confusion and apprehension. Richard, however, was his usual blustering self, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Now, as you all know," he began, his voice booming across the room, "Lancaster Industries is facing challenges. But I assure you, these are merely temporary setbacks. We have a plan, a strategy." He droned on, oblivious to the shifting glances, the whispered conversations, the growing unease. I sat quietly, observing the scene, a silent predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The chairman of the board, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. Richard, he interrupted, his voice surprisingly firm. We've been reviewing the company's performance, and, well, let's just say we have some concerns. Richard's brow furrowed. Concerns? About what? About your leadership, Richard. Mrs. Johnson, another board member, chimed in, her voice laced with a hint of disapproval. Your recent decisions, your investments, they've been reckless. Reckless, Richard scoffed. I'll have you know that I built this company from the ground up. I know what I'm doing. Do you, Richard? Mr. Thompson asked, his gaze steady, unwavering. Or have you become complacent, arrogant, blind to the company's vulnerabilities? Richard sputtered, his face reddening with anger. I will not tolerate this insubordination, he blustered. I am the CEO of this company. Not anymore, Richard, I said, my voice cutting through the tension, silencing the room. All eyes turned to me. Richard stared, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with disbelief. Logan? He stammered. What are you doing here? I'm here to take over, I said, my voice calm, even. I'm the majority shareholder now, Richard, and this is my company now. A collective gasp filled the room. The board members, once hesitant, now looked at me with a mixture of awe and relief. They had been waiting for this, for someone to challenge Richard's reign, to steer the company back on course. You? Richard sputtered, his face contorted with rage. But you're nothing. A data analyst. Not anymore, Richard, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I'm the CEO of Lancaster Industries now, and you're fired. The words hung in the air, a sweet symphony of revenge. Richard's face drained of all color, his body trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. He had been defeated, outmaneuvered, outsmarted. And by me. The board members, sensing the shift in power, quickly moved to formalize the takeover. Documents were signed, votes were cast, and, just like that, it was done. Lancaster Industries was mine. Richard, his pride shattered, his empire crumbled, stormed out of the boardroom, his parting words a string of curses and threats. But I didn't care. I had won. I had taken everything from him. His company, his power, his dignity. And as I sat in his former chair, the weight of my victory settling upon me, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. It wasn't just about the money, the power, the revenge. It was about proving myself, about overcoming the years of humiliation, about finally being seen. The game was over, and I had won. Tyler, bless his oblivious heart, was still living in a world where Daddy's money and a famous last name could solve everything. He'd been sulking since the boardroom coup, but hadn't truly grasped the magnitude of the shift in power. He still saw me as Logan, the nerd, the guy who fetched coffee and crunched numbers. He was in for a rude awakening. The opportunity presented itself at the annual Lancaster Industries Gala, a lavish affair held at a swanky downtown hotel. It was a who's who of the business world, a chance for Richard, or rather me now, to schmooze with investors, partners, and, well, to show off a little. Tyler naturally saw it as a chance to flaunt his status, to impress his equally clueless friends with his connections and influence. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by a gaggle of sycophants bragging about his latest investment, which, knowing Tyler, was probably a losing bet on a racehorse named Daddy's Money. I watched him from afar, a glass of champagne in my hand, a smirk playing on my lips. This was it, the perfect stage for his downfall, a public execution of his privilege and arrogance. I sauntered over, two security guards flanking me, their presence a silent but undeniable message. The chatter around Tyler died down, his friends exchanging nervous glances, sensing that something interesting was about to happen. Tyler, I said, my voice cutting through the tense silence, we need to talk. He looked at me, his brow furrowed with annoyance. Logan, What do you want? Can't you see I'm—" He gestured vaguely towards his entourage. Busy? This won't take long, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. Tyler, you're fired. The words hung in the air, a bombshell exploding in the middle of the gala. Tyler's jaw dropped, his eyes widening with disbelief. His friends stared, stunned into silence, their carefully constructed facades of nonchalance crumbling. Fired, Tyler sputtered, his face turning a delightful shade of crimson. You can't fire me. My father. Your father, I interrupted, my voice laced with a hint of steel, is no longer the CEO of this company. I am, and I'm afraid your services are no longer required. He laughed, a nervous, brittle sound that cracked under the weight of the truth. This is a joke, right? You're messing with me. I assure you, Tyler, I said, my voice cold, final. This is not a joke. You're fired, effective immediately. The security guard stepped forward, their presence no longer subtle. Tyler's friends, sensing the shift in power, the undeniable reality of the situation, began to subtly distance themselves, melting back into the crowd, leaving him standing alone, exposed and humiliated. But, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape, an ally, a miracle. But there was none. Please escort Mr. Lancaster out, I instructed the guards, my voice devoid of any emotion. They moved in, their hands firm but gentle, guiding him away from the bar towards the exit, his protests fading into the background noise of the gala. His friends watched, their faces a mixture of shock and schadenfreude. They had always secretly resented Tyler's privilege, his arrogance, his everything. And now they were witnessing his downfall, his public humiliation. I watched him go, a flicker of something crossing my heart. Was it satisfaction? Pity? Perhaps a bit of both. Tyler was a product of his environment, a spoiled brat who had never learned the value of hard work, of humility, of respect. He was a victim of his father's misguided love, a casualty of his own arrogance. But I had no time for pity. I had a company to run, an empire to rebuild, a future to create. And that future didn't include Tyler Lancaster. As the gala resumed, the chatter returning, the music swelling, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. This was it, the end of an era, the beginning of a new one. And I, Logan, the lowly data analyst, the nobody, was now in charge. Running Lancaster Industries wasn't just about making money or wielding power. It was about understanding the beast I had inherited, about dissecting its inner workings, its history, its secrets. And it was in those dusty archives, amidst forgotten files and yellowed documents, that I stumbled upon the truth. I had been poring over old company records, tracing the lineage of the business, trying to understand its evolution, its soul. I was looking for any skeletons in the closet, any hidden liabilities, anything that could give me an edge. And then I found it. A file, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the archive, labeled simply Project Phoenix. The name itself sent a shiver down my spine. Phoenix. It was a name my mother had mentioned once, a long time ago, a whispered memory of a business venture, a failure, my father's failure. I opened the file, my hands trembling slightly. Inside were documents, contracts, agreements, and letters. Letters written in my father's handwriting, letters filled with hope, with ambition, with despair. I started reading, my heart pounding in my chest, the words blurring before my eyes. It was a story I had never heard, a story of betrayal, of manipulation, of theft. My father, it turned out, had been the original heir to Lancaster Industries. He had inherited the company from his own father, a man who had built it from the ground up. My father, young and idealistic, had big plans for the company, plans to expand, to innovate, to make a difference. But Richard, my mother's second husband, had other plans. He had been a rising star in the company, a trusted advisor, a friend. Or so my father had thought. The documents revealed a pattern of calculated moves, of subtle manipulations, of betrayal. Richard had slowly, systematically undermined my father's position, whispering doubts in the ears of the board members, sabotaging his projects, slowly eroding his credibility. And then, the final blow. Project Phoenix, a venture my father had poured his heart and soul into, a project that Richard had secretly sabotaged, ensuring its failure. The failure that had cost my father his reputation, his career, his everything. The letters told the story. My father's initial excitement, his growing frustration, his eventual despair. He had trusted Richard, believed in him, considered him a friend. And Richard had used that trust to destroy him. I finished reading, my hands shaking, my mind reeling. The truth was a heavy weight, a crushing burden of understanding. Richard wasn't just a cruel stepfather, a man who had belittled me, humiliated me, made me feel like a nobody. He was the reason my father had lost everything. He was the reason my father had failed. The anger that had been simmering within me for years, the resentment that had fueled my ambition, the desire for revenge. It all intensified, burning hotter, fiercer, more personal. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It wasn't about taking down Richard's company. It was about justice. It was about avenging my father, about reclaiming what had been stolen from him. The game had changed. It wasn't just a game anymore. It was a war. And I was going to win. Not just for myself, but for my father, for the man whose legacy had been stolen, whose dreams had been crushed, whose name I was determined to restore. The anger was no longer cold and calculating. It was hot, visceral, a burning need to right the wrongs of the past, to make Richard pay for what he had done. And as I sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of my father's dreams, I made a vow. Richard Lancaster would pay. He would pay for what he had done. And he would pay dearly. Richard stormed into my office like a raging bull, his face contorted with fury, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking. He hadn't bothered with pleasantries, hadn't even knocked. He just barged in, his presence filling the room with a toxic mix of anger and desperation. "Logan!" he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. "What the hell is going on? What have you done?" I leaned back in my chair, my expression calm, even amused. "Richard," I said, my voice even, measured, "to what do I owe this pleasure?" "Pleasure?" he spat, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think this is a game? You think you can just take what's mine?" "It was never yours, Richard," I said, my gaze steady, unwavering. "It was my father's, and you stole it from him." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of fear momentarily replacing the rage. "What are you talking about?" he blustered. "You're delusional. You're just trying to justify your betrayal." "Betrayal?" I echoed, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "You talk about betrayal? You who betrayed my father, who stole his company, who ruined his life?" He scoffed. "Those are lies, fabrications. You have no proof." "Oh, I do," I said, my voice soft, dangerous. "I have proof, Richard. Documents, contracts, letters. All neatly filed away, waiting to be revealed." I gestured towards a locked drawer in my desk. "Project Phoenix," I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. "Does that name ring a bell?" His face paled, the color draining from his cheeks. He knew that I knew. You were snooping," he stammered, his voice weak. "I was investigating," I corrected him, my voice cold, hard. I wanted to understand the company I had inherited, and in doing so, I uncovered a few interesting facts. I stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the city skyline. "You know, Richard," I said, my voice thoughtful, "I used to think this was about proving myself, about showing you that I wasn't a nobody, that I was worthy. I turned back to him, my gaze piercing. But it's not about that anymore. It's about justice. It's about righting the wrongs you committed. It's about avenging my father. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing him. Don't bother denying it, Richard, I said, my voice firm. I have everything I need. The evidence is irrefutable. You manipulated my father. You sabotaged his projects. You stole his company. And now, you're going to pay. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. What? What do you want? He whispered, his voice barely audible. I want what's rightfully mine, I said, my voice cold, hard. I want the company you stole. I want the reputation you tarnished. I want justice. But I can explain, he pleaded, his voice cracking. It was business. It was necessary. Necessary, I scoffed. Necessary to destroy my father? Necessary to build your empire on his ruins? Necessary to humiliate me for years? He didn't answer. His gaze fixed on the floor, his shoulders slumping. He knew he was beaten. He knew that I had him. You have two choices, Richard, I said, my voice calm, even. You can leave quietly, disappear from my life, and try to salvage what's left of your reputation. Or I can expose everything. Your shady dealings, your manipulations, your betrayal. The choice is yours. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and resignation. He knew he had no choice. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, outsmarted, and by me. I'll leave, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. Good, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. That's wise. And with that, Richard Lancaster, the man who had tormented me for years, the man who had stolen my father's legacy, turned and walked out of my office, defeated, disgraced, and, finally, powerless. Taking over Lancaster Industries wasn't just about revenge. It was about rebuilding, about creating something better, something worthy. I wasn't interested in simply inheriting Richard's empire, built on a foundation of manipulation and deceit. I wanted to create my own legacy, a legacy built on integrity, innovation, and, well, maybe a little bit of that disruptive spirit I'd inherited from my father. First order of business? Cleaning house. And I don't mean just firing Tyler, though that was definitely a highlight. I'm talking about a deep cleanse, a purging of the old guard, the yes-men, the sycophants who had enabled Richard's reign of terror. We need a new culture, I announced at my first all-hands meeting, the room filled with nervous faces, the echoes of Richard's tyrannical leadership still lingering in the air. A culture of transparency, of accountability, of respect. I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They had heard it all before, empty promises from CEOs who were more interested in profits than people. But I was determined to prove them wrong. I started with the small things: open-door policy, regular feedback sessions, employee appreciation initiatives. Turns out, people really like free coffee and donuts. Who knew? Then the bigger changes. I implemented stricter ethical guidelines, revamped the company's investment strategy, and, well, let's just say that creative accounting was no longer tolerated. Logan, are you sure about this? Danny asked, his brow furrowed with concern. These changes, they're expensive. They're necessary, Danny, I insisted. We're not just building a company. We're building a community, a place where people feel valued, respected, and inspired. He still looked skeptical, but I could see the admiration in his eyes. He knew I was doing the right thing, even if it wasn't the easy thing. The changes weren't just internal. I reached out to the community, partnering with local organizations, investing in education initiatives, even sponsoring a youth robotics competition. Okay, maybe that last one was a bit self-serving, but hey, gotta nurture the next generation of tech geniuses, right? Lancaster Industries is different, a local newspaper declared. Under the leadership of Logan, the company has undergone a remarkable transformation, shedding its old image and embracing a new era of corporate responsibility. The positive press was gratifying, but it wasn't about the accolades. It was about building something meaningful, something lasting. And then there were the employees, the ones who had been overlooked, undervalued, and, well, bullied by Richard and his cronies. I saw their potential, their talent, their hunger. I promoted from within, giving opportunities to those who deserved them, not just the ones with the right last name or the right connections. I created mentorship programs, encouraged innovation, and, well, let's just say that the coffee runs were now optional. Logan, you've changed this company. One of my senior engineers said to me one day, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. You've given us hope. Hope. It was a powerful word, a word that resonated with me more than any financial report or market analysis. Because that's what I wanted to build. A company where people felt valued, where they could thrive, where they could hope. And as I walked through the hallways of Lancaster Industries, seeing the smiles on the faces of the employees, hearing the buzz of creativity, feeling the energy of a company reborn, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Not the arrogant pride of Richard, but a quiet, humble pride in knowing that I had done something good. The company was thriving, profits were up, morale was high, and, well, the coffee was actually pretty decent. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the people, the culture, the soul of the company. And as I sat in my office late one night, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I realized that my greatest victory wasn't just taking down Richard. It was building something better, something more. It was about creating a legacy that my father would have been proud of.